Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. My name is Chantal, Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. Our guest today is Judith Alexis Augustine Craig, and she's here to talk about adoption and identity. A big topic that obviously we're not going to cover all in 45 minutes, but we do have some great questions that we're going to get to. If you are watching live, or maybe you're going to be watching this later on replay, so thank you for taking the time to be with us. Please feel free to add your comments to the conversation, or if you have a question for Judith, please feel free to put it in the comment in the chat box as well. Just take a moment to remind you, if you're new here, that because it's on our public Facebook page, we ask you to be mindful of what information you're including in your question. So just don't include any identifiable information if you're asking a question regarding a minor, since it's available to all on the internet. So we just want you to be mindful of that. Keep that in mind, and we hope that you find this discussion informative and engaging. Before I jump into the questions, I'm just going to take a quick moment to introduce Judith. She is a registered social worker specializing in fostering and adoption. Over the past 20 years, Judith's professional experiences have reflected a diverse portfolio. She has worked in child welfare, fostering, private adoption, developed and facilitated workshops for adoptive parents and professionals, and has been invited to be a panelist and keynote speaker at numerous events focused on adoption. She's a passionate international speaker and author who's been featured in a variety of print, radio, and television media outlets. And in 2012, the documentary Adopted ID was released, which features Judith's search for her biological family. So welcome, Judith.
Thank you so much, Chantal. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to be here with you all.
Yeah, really so happy you could join us too. So like I said, it's a big topic, but we're going to do our best to dig into certain aspects of it. So maybe before we get into that part, we could, if you felt comfortable, to just tell us a little bit more about you, like just beyond the bio.
Yes, for sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today, and really happy to be here and talk about this really important part of adoption and permanency. And to add a little bit about myself, so I am an adoptee. I was transracially adopted as a foundling from Haiti, which is in the Caribbean, and I was adopted to a predominantly white family in Canada, actually in Quebec at the time, and we moved around some and landed here in the GTA, where we resided for most of that time. I am one of 5 children raised in my adoptive family, and my parents have 3 biological children. They adopted myself and later went on to adopt my brother from Haiti as well. So grew up in a family of 5. And as I said, he and I are the 2 Black members of our family, and then the others are all white. And yeah, had a really unique experience, I would say, in sort of navigating that and what that was like. I am a mom myself. I have 2 biological daughters. I have a bonus daughter, and I am soon to be mom to a little guy through adoption, actually, as well, through my partner. So it's very exciting. I've also been a foster mom temporarily. So I've really come to motherhood with lots of various hats and different experiences. And that, of course, has brought with it many challenges and many joys. So that's a little bit about me and who I am.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing, and congratulations.
Thank you.
So I mentioned also in that introduction about the documentary, Adopted ID, that you did, and that was about that personal journey that brought you to Haiti to search for your birth family. So maybe could you share, like, why was it important that you wanted to document it in that way?
Yeah, it was interesting because I sort of always grew up talking about my experience of being an adoptee. Being a transracial adoptee meant it was never hidden, if you will. It was never something I couldn't not talk about. And I really felt, although my views, of course, have changed now in terms of how much I shared, at the time I would share so much. I was this open book to people, and I felt I had to do that when people asked me questions. So I sort of got to this point where I was so used to sharing and sharing. There were moments when I thought, oh, I don't want to always share about this. But when it came to my sort of journey back, I knew I wanted to share sort of something in some manner, but I didn't know how. And then a friend of mine, we actually moved to London, England for several years and worked there as a social worker. And a friend of mine, when we started to get to know each other, she was a new friend and she was a filmmaker. And she said, oh my God, your story, you should document this. And like, you know, you want to return to Haiti, I can come with you, we can do this thing. And I was so nervous. I thought, oh, I don't know about that. But you know, after sort of more conversation, I thought, you know what, though, maybe this is the right way. I can be more in control of sort of the narrative of what I do share and what this journey is like, because I know so many adoptees who don't have the voice and don't have necessarily the opportunity. And I think it's so important that we learn and we grow and we share together as an adopted community. And that's really important. And I really wanted to sort of put it out there in a very particular manner. So it was still challenging, but it was also, to be honest, one of the most exciting and powerful experiences of my life. So I'm really glad that I did document it. And for myself and my families, plural, you know, it's now this documented piece of history. And that's a really unique opportunity that I've had. You know, I've shared it obviously with my children and my wider families. And so that's pretty special to have such a significant part of your life actually recorded and something I go back to. And of course I use in the work that I do as well, working with families and adopted folks as well. So I do think it was a good decision, but it definitely came with some fear at times for sure. And the vulnerability.
So, well, just while we're on this subject of the documentary, maybe I'm curious to know, like, I know it was probably over a long period of time, but if there were moments that still really hold, whether it was something that was really, really challenging or really, really joyous, like on that sort of.
On that spectrum, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. so many.
I know. Like, just tell me one. You know. No, I'm kidding.
Well, no. One moment that for me was, I think, really joyful, and you'll see this in the film for those who watched it. Those who can't can get a copy. It was when we were in a town and we were connected with this gentleman who believed we could be siblings. And so we drove to this town. It was in the north part of Haiti. And we went in and we were welcomed so warmly. It was like the whole town was there to welcome us and greet us. And, you know, we're ushered in, and it was quite strange at first because I was sort of there, and we obviously, my friends there with me with the camera, and we had another camera person with us from Haiti, as well as a driver. And so the four of us sort of go into this town and we're welcome to this home. We sit on this big porch and everybody's looking at us, and people just came and were staring. So it was somewhat awkward because all of a sudden we were just the center of attention, but people were really, honestly, they just seemed to have this earnest curiosity and wonderment. And people were looking at me and looking at the other people in the family, and, oh yeah, you look familiar, you look similar, and sort of. But I think for me, it was just such a warm welcome. And people were genuinely interested and curious and wanting to know more about me and what this meant for us. And it was a really powerful moment. And I remember when we were leaving, then we stayed for quite a couple of hours. And when we were walking out, it was again like the whole town sort of walked with us to our car. And even as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking, wow, it was just the warmth, I think, really that enveloped us. And I was quite overwhelmed in the moment, kind of looking around and seeing all these people. But, you know, having that was, for me, somebody who wasn't sure if I was going to be accepted when I went back to Haiti. Is my community going to embrace me, or will they shun me, you know, because I'm not Haitian enough? And that, for me, and that happened multiple times in Haiti where we were so warmly welcomed and received back, which was awesome. But that was really, really significant, I think, for me to have that and just feel swept up in this beautiful community. So that was a key positive for sure. I think from a negative perspective, there is definitely something in the film that I think, oh my God, why did I put that in there? But it really it comes part and parcel with opening yourself up and being vulnerable, and I had something that we found out was psychosomatic seizures I ended up having, which essentially it was due to stress. It was a very stressful time. I'd had them a few times before, and I was sort of thinking, oh my God, what is this? I've been checked out by a doctor and everything, and this is what they labeled it as. So being in Haiti, as you can appreciate, we were there for a month. It was very intense. It was, grasping sometimes at straws, putting ourselves out there so widely. I did media blitz and campaigns and newspapers and TV and radio, and it was so much giving and putting myself out there and hoping for a positive outcome that at one point I actually have a seizure. And my friend and filmmaker, she did capture it. And it was, every time I look at it, I kind of, cringe a bit, and I'm like, oh God. But I also acknowledge how important it is to show sort of all the facets of this. This trip was not just easy breezy. It had so many different layers to it, and it was incredible, but it was also very challenging and very emotionally draining. And it came out, it manifested for me physically. So that was hard. But I also now, it's been several years, I kind of look at that and think, no, people need to know this part as well. And so I am glad it's included, although it can be hard still to watch sometimes.
I can imagine. But I also see your point of, that you can't exclude that from the story either, because that's part of it. And you see so often in mainstream media that adoptive narrative that it's all just this pleasant path to reunification or just self-discovery, and it's not always that easy.
Not. No.
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's it is quite a legacy that you have there in film.
Yeah.
So like I said, we're trying to dig into identity in what we can between the two of us in the next half an hour. So there's been a lot written about identity, how it's one of the core issues when talking about adoption and permanency. And obviously every adoptee journey is so unique.
Yeah.
They're not going to have that same journey. So maybe I could ask you from your personal journey, what that was like what the challenge, what you found challenging in terms of your journey through identity and discovering that.
Oh yes, it is a big one, as you say. In half an hour, we're as much as we get in. But I guess I would really start really very, very early. I actually, being a transracial adoptee adds, I believe, very much another layer. You have adoption, which, as you rightly said, is about identity and sort of the other 7 core issues that we talk about, loss, rejection, and all of these things that are so, so important and relevant for all adoptees, for sure. As a transracial adoptee, the layer of identity sort of goes even deeper, because not only are you navigating as an adopted person through your family and families, plural, right? What does that mean? From your first family to your adoptive family and anybody else in your network, foster families, that could be, right? So with developing then who you are, it's also then this racial divide and difference that you're having to manage. And what does that look like? How does that feel? How do you navigate that? So for myself, I would say it started very painfully. As I mentioned, I was adopted to Canada, but after about a year, we actually moved to the States. And although we were in Ohio and northern states, people sometimes think the north south so different. This was in the early 80s. It was not very different, unfortunately. It was extremely racially segregated. And because the majority of my family were white, we lived in the white part of town. My dad is a minister still, and he was working in a space. We went to a church that was predominantly white. Our neighborhood, our friends were white. My 2 best friends when I was little were white. So I grew up in this whiteness, and I didn't see myself reflected positively. Some occasional images on TV or in books, and my parents did work hard to try and get some Black books into the home, for example. But what I saw, 99% of the time was whiteness. And so how do I, as a little Black girl, fit? How do I figure out who I am? And it got so extreme. And that I actually started to really, I call it now at my identity crisis, started when I was about 2 years old. And that's young, but that is, the beginning stages of when children do start to notice difference and other people notice my difference. It was very stark. So I not only had my own internalized things, it came from the outside. So other children or adults even would say, who are you? How do you fit into this family? So my identity as a member of the family was questioned all the time, consistently. My older sister, who was 3 years older than me, would stand up and say, that's my sister, and claim me, but it still didn't fully connect the dots for me. And it left me really loathing who I was. My mom shares the stories. I would walk around and I would be trying to scratch off my black skin. Like literally, I would say, I don't want to be black. I hated it. I would get very upset, very emotional. I didn't like my nose. I didn't like my hair. I had a little afro at the time. My sister and my mom had long, beautiful hair that's flowed and, the white skin, the pointy nose. I wanted to look like what I saw. My best friends looked like that. That was what was normalized for me. And so having that, it was incredibly sad when I think back of my younger self and think, oh my God, that inner turmoil that I would have experienced really is very painful to think about. And my mom was distraught. She really was concerned. And eventually we actually moved back up to Toronto in about 2 or 3 years later. And they had had another biological child as well by this point. So I was now the middle of these two beautiful little blonde girls. And then there was me. And it really took moving back to the city and Toronto being diverse. Again, this was in the mid 80s, but it was very diverse. And our neighbor down the street was this lovely Black woman who came over when she saw our moving truck and introduced herself. And she had 2 daughters, and one of them she had with her that day. And we were the same age. And within 2 weeks, and my mom shares a story, and she was like, thank God this happened. But within about 2 weeks of me and Lee Helen playing together, and it was the end of summer, so we had a lot of time to play and hang out at each other's homes, and we're getting settled in. They became fast friends. And I tell you, that 2-week period, I stopped saying I didn't want my Black skin. I didn't want my little afro. I didn't want to look and be Black, because I finally had representation right in front of me. And I could see that, oh, it's okay to be Black. This isn't a bad thing. I am different from members of my family, but it's not bad different. And that was really what it took, was being surrounded by those who looked like me and other members of our community. We made other friends in the community that were of various ethno-racial backgrounds, but having Blackness in my life so significantly was key. It didn't mean I didn't have other identity challenges as I went on, because we did eventually move away from Toronto. We moved to the suburbs of Toronto in the GTA, and I had to go through again the questions, the asking about our family. Now there were 2 Black children and another white child, and how did we fit in? So every time we moved, it was explaining who I was and how I fit into my family. And it was also struggling with connecting again. I never had another friendship quite like Lee Helen. And that was very difficult. I had some lovely friends of different racial backgrounds, but I missed that connection with another Black child. And that was difficult as well, because as I was going through preteen, teenage years, as we all know, those are challenging at the best of times. Having, again, these extra layers of adoption and then transracial adoption, I didn't have people I could really speak to about it and who could understand what I was going through. So that definitely had another huge impact on my identity and where I felt comfortable. I was called an Oreo. You look Black, but you act white, you talk, you dress very, I dressed very preppy. I was a Gap girl. I didn't fit in. I didn't understand all of the cultural references. I didn't connect to the music in the same way. My parents were very religious. So my identity was very much drawn up in the church at the time. So even that differed me in some ways from others, and connecting to people was very challenging from my own community. I really feared it. I feared being in a room of all Black people. And that's pretty scary to say, that's dangerous that I didn't feel comfortable in that way. So it definitely has been a thread throughout life, in terms of finding my identity and figuring out where I fit in. I really felt misplaced. And so that journey has been long and arduous over the years, for sure.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, because it's so important, because I think for a lot of transracial adoptees, or the parents that adopted children that are Black or Indigenous or of a different culture, as a white adoptee, adopted by a white family, like, sure, I went through my own journey, but it was not at that such a young age, because from the outside, I just looked like I belonged. There was nobody questioning if I belonged anywhere,
Yeah.
you know? And I couldn't even imagine at that young age having to deal with those questions too. So, you know, it's important for, I think, people who are watching this or listening as adoptive parents or caregivers, if you are a transracial adoptive family, how important it is to make sure that the child's culture is reflected
Oh my goodness.
everywhere, as much in the house, in the community, in the school. Like, yeah. So thank you for sharing that. We have so many questions. So I have to move on. But I know it's going to be like a thread, like it's like a thread. Because I could just, like, you know, go off on so many tangents there.
Yeah, there's so always.
So when talking with other adoptees, which, you know, we've been doing more of over the last year, and we did specifically more this month during Adoption Awareness Month, there are some commonalities when talking about identity. And some adoptees express that they feel that they had to create their identities from the outside in. So meaning, like, innately they didn't have that sense of who they were, who they belonged to. So they had to, like, literally work at it from the outside. Oh, maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll try this on. Do you identify with that feeling, or was it different for you? I mean, obviously it's different for everybody, but
yeah, 100%. I think that's the beauty. Every, as you said, you know, every adopted person has a unique story, but I find in my interactions with adopted people over the years, there's also so many commonalities, right? And sort of, you know, I find, and one of the areas that helped me in developing my identity as an adopted person and where I fit in there was connecting with other adopted people and realizing, oh my God, you went through that too? You've experienced that? Oh, it's really like this homecoming. It's, you know, this warmth and connectivity that you just don't have with other people who have not lived the experience, right? And sometimes people think, oh, well, I can understand, and great, you can be an ally to it, you can be supportive, but when we connect, I find, with other people who have lived it, it just gives you a whole different perspective. And I always think, gosh, I could have done so much of my work on myself and everything I had to sort of process from such a younger age if I had had my community. So one thing I would definitely say for helping your children to develop their identity and sense of self is 100% being in spaces that are adoptee friendly and adoptee normalized. And I use that in air quotes, right? But it is important that we normalize the adopted and permanency journey. And we can do that in so many different ways. And there's so much more now than there was when I was adopted. And, you know, when we were coming up, I would suggest there's groups for families, there's camps, there's, you know, online support now, especially in this day and age, and we're doing everything online. There's so many online spaces. There's people sharing their stories through podcasts and books and articles, and I mean, TV shows. We're seeing so much more, I would say, so much better, pardon me, writing happening on TV shows and in movies nowadays. There's been quite a narrative about our journey. And that doesn't help when you're trying to figure out who you are. Because if you're cast as this demonic child, for example, in some of these films, or this bad one who's going to burn down the house or do this or do that and do all these horrific things, of course, you're kind of like, okay, you don't want to connect with that. You don't want to be proud of who you are in your, you know, as an adopted person. And that all impacts your ability to create and develop your identity, I would suggest. And that's really, really important. So what I've been happy to see is more positive and more realistic portrayals of our community. And that's an important part. So as you're looking at things, you can connect, you can relate, and you're able to say, oh yeah, I went through that. And they're showing that now on screen. It's about connecting, as I say, with other people in your community and relating to each other and having more understanding within your family that you need to have those connections. And there are certain things that as your adoptive family or your permanency family, you aren't able to always give your child everything. And I think as families, we think, oh, we're here, we do everything for our child. We go like this and we're like, But actually, I'd suggest that once we sort of loosen those reins and we're able to see the benefit and the beauty of receiving things from different people, it helps your child to develop more of their identity and who they are and where they fit in. You know, adopted people often talk about this duality that they have in terms of their identity and who they are. And it's very, very true. It's okay, I am a person who is from two families. I have two families, at least minimum, sometimes more, right? But you have a birth original first family. There's so many new and better words I would say to use to explain that and explore what that means. That's so important. That never goes away. That bond never goes away. Even if you're not in communication or an active relationship with your biological or first family, there is still a connection there because you are from them, right? We don't cut those ties, completely. And with your adoptive family or a foster family or your family through permanency, those are strong ties that you're creating and developing. So you pull from all of those different families and spaces to develop who you are. But it can be a journey that's fraught with a lot of challenge, especially if it's not always recognized and acknowledged that you are truly from this very unique space that not, really the majority of our population does not have this experience of having to create your identity in the same way, right? So it's a unique perspective to have to be in, and it can be painful. It's not necessarily an easy journey, but I think when it's acknowledged by all of those in your life that you have all of these beautiful elements to you, it's a heck of a lot easier to develop yourself and to find this comfortable place where you can kind of nestle and you're like, okay, I'm happy, I'm balanced now with myself as in my identity. But it takes a lot to get there, and the more support you have, I suggest that the easier and the better that experience will be often.
So many great points you made there. I'm just like, ah. I mean, I can totally relate because at the time when there weren't these groups. There wasn't, like, it was all very closed and hush hush, and just like they're like, okay, just this is your kid now, and that's it. We don't look back. And so I didn't really start, like, it was only like randomly or by hazard that I would meet someone and then eventually find out if they were adopted. And then there was, like you say, like that instant sort of like, oh, well, we get each other. And it's just, there's so much that doesn't need to be said. But I think back, like if I had those connections at a younger age, how that would have impacted my identity, like, or me processing all that from an early age probably would have made it a little bit easier. I still remember, like, friends, like they'd get in an argument with their parents and they'd be like, oh, I wish I was adopted, like, and I'd be like, I'm not sure how to do that.
Do you?
I'm just gonna ignore that and move on.
No, and it's used so loosely like that, right? Or it's like, when in a family dynamic, oh, you must be adopted because you're so different from the family. And people, again, it comes back to the words and what are we saying and the impact that has. Like, okay, that's actually quite offensive. When you think about that, it's like, okay, what does that mean? What are you saying then about us who are adopted? It's othering us again. And yes, there's difference. And I think we have to also switch how we see that. Difference can be a beautiful thing. Difference doesn't have to be bad. And I think often, again, how it's been viewed in society is, oh, you're different, or you know what I mean? And it's like almost like this sympathetic or this oh, here sort of it can be very condescending sometimes, right? Or just seen very negatively. And I think that's where a lot of the danger comes in as well, around sort of, okay, so if I'm so different and you're saying it in such a negative manner, that must mean I'm negative, I'm bad. And a lot of adopted people internalize that, right? And then that's part and parcel of the struggle that people are on. And that's hard. It's hard to sort of overcome that and build your self-esteem and your confidence and your own self-worth, because again, you've experienced rejection and loss, right? Even if you've been relinquished in, there's so many different ways people come to this, but I would offer that regardless of how you came to be in a new family, you lost a first family to be in the family you are now. And that's part of what makes you up as well, is that is a form of rejection and loss. And that's very, very painful. So how do you reckon that as a person, as an individual, to say, I must be worthy. Somebody must want me and love me. Even if you have a family that says, yes, we do, you still have others who, and I'm not saying that your first family didn't love you, but that can often be what the narrative is, right? For self and from other people as well. So we have to be very mindful of the narratives that we are sharing with our children, I would suggest, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what you were saying in the first part of your answer, I think you even said it twice, and like the bond is always there. And regardless of whether, a child came into your home when they were a newborn or a child or a teenager, obviously when it's older, it's more obvious, but even that bond always exists. And like you were saying about having like that community, like that, how the parent, whether you're even in a biological family, you wouldn't be the one in all everything for your child, right? They have peers, or they have coaches, or they have teachers, or other people that support them and that they can learn from on their journey. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yeah.
So in this, you mentioned a lot, which I think is a perfect segue into our next question about words and language, and why words are so important when we talk specifically. They're always important, but specifically around the idea of adoption. So I'm wondering if you could share with our community about why, like, where that comes from, why. I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, but maybe we could dig into a bit more about why words are so important in the language we use when we're talking with our family members, our kids, our community.
I think words are very powerful. My personal belief is that the words that we put out, what we put out to the universe, is what we attract, negatively and positively. So it is very important. And I've, over the last several years since having children, there's certain words that even I'll say, we really don't use the word can't in our family, because it's all about what can we do, and reframing that. I can't do it, mommy, and it's you can with help, right? A very simple switch, but it's helping your child to learn that and empowering them along that journey, right? We want to always empower or support the journey to empowerment. We can't empower other people, but we can support them on their journey. And simple changes in our language have a huge impact. Now it's like, oh, I can do this with help and support. So similarly with adopted children, it's right, the language and the words that they're hearing you say as their parent about their first family, about their adoption journey, about their experiences of who they are and from what they have come from, is extremely important. When you hear negative words, oh, that family, their first family or their birth family, X, Y, and Z, right? And if they're hearing only negative things said about them, what do you think that does for them? Because they are of them. Again, that bond isn't cut. They are biologically connected to their first family, and they have traits, right? They have personality traits. They may have interests that are similar. They can have parts of themselves that come from that. And if we're always talking negatively or putting down first family members, that is something that your child, I would suggest, often internalizes that. And they may not say it to you, you may never hear them speak about it, but every time they hear you talk about it or share information about their story with somebody, they're taking that on and they're listening. The tone of voice that you use, right, when you talk about it, the word choices that you use. And I'm not saying that there aren't some horrible experiences. As a social worker, trust me, I've seen it. I've actually been in the middle of having to remove children from horrific experiences. So I'm not suggesting that we sugarcoat and we pretend like, oh yes, everything is perfect, because otherwise your child wouldn't be with you in many cases. And I say that cautiously because we know there are many reasons children come into care, and not all of them are warranted. I'll put it that way. So I don't want to take away and act like I'm minimizing that, but I also want it to be very clear that we still have a duty to respect and show respect to a first family, and show a respect to a country of origin if your child is intercountry adopted, right? I grew up with very negative images of Haiti. My mom and I would sit and cut out newspaper articles, right? It's the day of age when newspapers were all the thing. And I have a box still of articles this thick about Haiti, but the majority of it, probably 99%, are negative. Famine, poverty, political unrest. Where are the beautiful stories of Haiti? So much so that when I went back, I was truly in awe. I was looking around like, oh, it's so beautiful. It's a tropical oasis. It is gorgeous. Haiti is stunning. beautiful beaches, the mountains, it's very lush. It's the Caribbean. I mean, you know, but I didn't grow up with that image of beauty. And that's dangerous, that I had to go and wait until I was in my 20s to figure out that my country is this beautiful oasis with beautiful people and beautiful cultural elements to it. So I think that's where we have to really work hard at making sure we do share positive language with our children. We're using words that are appropriate, that are safe, so your child can start to feel safe. So they can share their thoughts and their feelings and know, okay, mom, dad, auntie, uncle, my permanency family is here for me and they're gonna support me as I'm going through my journey. And with all of my big, big feelings, I know I'm coming somewhere because they talk about me and my journey and my past in a positive way. And when there are difficult discussions to have, we have those discussions too. And it's not, again, it's being realistic and honest, but doing so in a way that frames it and helps your child to build their own framework around what that looks like and feels like for them, is what I would really, really suggest for people.
Thank you. Making you do so much work today.
Apologies, I have to keep sipping.
Oh, please. Okay, so next, what advice would you share with white parents who have adopted transracially on how to promote a healthy connection with identity? I know there are certain suggestions that you already made when we talked about it earlier, but if we could dive into that a bit more too.
100%. And this is a huge one. You know, I do the work that I do sort of in my private practice. I work with families around this a lot because it is such, it's something that is so essential to help your child develop as we've talked about, themselves as a person. And I think something that often gets a little bit lost, especially when people are new to their, you know, permanency families or journeys. It's exciting. You have a little one in your life often, you know, but what we have to remember is we're children for really 18 years. I mean, I suggest 20, but you know, technically we're children for 18 years. After that, we live our whole life as adults, right? We live the rest of our life walking on our own, essentially. You go off to school, you may move out of your family home. You're not in this bubble of protection, if you will, or, you know, with a family who loves and accepts you for just who you are. We have to face reality. And reality in our world says your child of color will most likely face prejudice, racism, microaggressions, which is a really, really big one that often isn't talked about enough. You know, that's the kind of comments that people like, oh, you speak English so well. Excuse me, pardon me, you know, oh, where are you from really? So, there's so many. I mean, I could list them off. We'd be here for the rest of the afternoon, but there are important experiences that your children will have, not when, I would suggest, sorry, not if, it's more of a when, to be very frank. And I say that, and some people say, oh, I don't really experience racism. Have you experienced prejudice? Have you experienced microaggressions? I suggest you probably have, and you might not even know it. And often for transracial adoptees, they haven't been prepared to handle that. Or how do you manage those things? You know, what comments do you say back? How do we stand up for ourselves? That all is into how do we develop ourselves to be able to stand that gap for ourselves. You know, when I was called the N-word when I was 5 years old in kindergarten, my mom and my Auntie Jane, you know, my best friend's mom, marched down to the school and handled it, like dealt with it. And I know that child got some serious consequences. What I saw was a great example of them standing that gap for me at that age. What I had to learn as I got older was, how do I do that for myself? Because my mom, my aunt, whoever is not going to always be there for me. So I really encourage folks, equip your children. And that again means coming outside of yourselves. Your children will never have the same experience as you. If you are not the same ethnicity as your child, you cannot stand in their shoes and they will never be in your shoes. So because we know that as a fact, then it's how do we get this support for our children? We reach out to their community, their ethno-racial community. We look at people who look like them, who represent them and reflect them. We go out of our way to do that. And it shouldn't be a burden. It should be, I know I need to do this to best support my child because I want them to grow up as a strong, independent, ethno-racial individual who is able to stand up for themselves when they experience this and be able to talk to people and educate people, but in a way where they're not losing themselves and they're not shrouding back and and minimizing who they are. It's so, so very important. And there are so many ways to do that. So connecting with community, having visual representation in your schools, as we said, your doctor, your nanny, if you have a nanny, or childcare providers. It can happen in a very natural way. And I would suggest it needs to happen in a natural way. It's not, oh, look, we had Chinese food tonight, tick, there we are for another month or another week. No, embed that into your daily life. It should be a part of, you are now a multiracial family. So what does that look like? And what does that mean for you? I think one of the second sort of parts of this, and I'm so cautious of time, but I just want to mention, if you live in a neighborhood or a community that is not as racially diverse and doesn't reflect your family, one, that's a challenge. I'll be very frank, that's a huge challenge. You have to work, I would suggest, extra hard to provide those spaces for your child. It's traveling to the nearest city that maybe has more cultural events or activities or people, and also ensuring that it's just in your friend group, in your peer network, and that your child has the opportunity to make friendships with people who look like them. It's books, it's artwork in your home, it's toys. I have predominantly black books and black toys in my home. And I've been very intentional raising Black children. I want them to see positive reflections of themselves. And that's in everyday life. So when they walk into their communities and into their spaces, they're walking in so with a certain confidence, because they do face it. They've had experiences, and that's extremely important.
Thank you. I'm really glad that we had time to get to that question specifically and really allow the opportunity for you to speak on that. I think everything we're talking about in terms of identity is important, but that specifically about racism, about the microaggressions, not the if, but the when, and how as parents they can intentionally prepare their kids for that, on how to advocate for themselves and deal with it when it happens.
Yeah, definitely. Not minimizing it. If your child comes home and says, oh, so-and-so called me X, Y, or Z.
Oh, they didn't mean it. They didn't mean it.
It's okay. And it might not be the N-word, right? It could be other,
like the microaggressions, like you say, because they're so nuanced that as a kid, you might not know. And then you might tell your parent, well, somebody said this to me. And then, it might just be sort of brushed off or brushed aside to not have a difficult conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but we're running out of time. So I thought maybe, I know somebody asked about the documentary, about where they could purchase. So I will include that information in the comments, but if you want to just quickly tell them, you could do that.
For sure. So we have it now. It is available for purchase online. It's Studio and Nancy, and the link will be there for you so you can see that. And very happy to speak to folks about the film and sort of the journey and what it's sort of all been about and what it's been like. I do host Q&As around the film as well. So I provide that as something. Sometimes I've had groups of, adoptive families or permanency families come together and just form, whether you're a preformed group or not, you can come together, and I'm happy to sort of join in. And it's great now we have this technology because we can do it just like this, but I can be there and answer questions about the film and really talk and do a workshop around some of the themes that come up in it, because it does dive, of course, a lot into identity and how you figure that out and who you are. So very happy to provide that support for folks on their journeys as well. But yeah, it can be purchased, and it's just an hour long, so it's not too long, but lots to it, lots to unpick with it for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll definitely post the link to that in the comments. Before we go, because I know we're really close, I just wanted to take a minute to ask, and I know it's another big, huge question, but over the course of the month, we've been asking this to a lot of our guests about, because language matters and how words are constantly shifting the context of things. So is there anything in terms of words or terms or phrases that you suggest that we consider unlearning around identity, or maybe just more generally around adoption and permanency?
Again, yeah, definitely. In a minute, I can say,
just sum it up in a minute.
there's lots, basically. But yeah, I think one of the ones for adoption specific to me that grinds me so much is gotcha day. And I have to tell you, that is a burn. And I've had words with adoptive or permanency parents before and challenged them on that. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't celebrate when a member of your family joins you. It's a beautiful time. It's also a time of loss. So balancing that is very, very important for yourself and most importantly for your child. I would offer that first and foremost. But using phrases like gotcha day, that's very much around ownership. And that's very much about totally, it's very uncomfortable. Some adoptees may not feel that way, but I think as a professional and as an adoptee, I've got to say that one needs to go. We need to eliminate, erase, eliminate, like just get that out of there for sure. I think we need to be mindful and cognitive of the word birth as well. We're starting to shift some of our language around that because we know that that term was not made up, if you will, by first or original families. And that's a more appropriate, I would suggest, terminology that we're starting to see come out more. Birth sort of minimizes their role. It's like you are the birth and now we're the parent. But as we said earlier, is they will always be an integral part of your child, right? I offer that you have a shared child. You wouldn't have your child in your life if you didn't have the first family. So I think that's another way of showing honor and respect. So I think we need to keep working on that. I still use it sometimes because people often don't understand what I'm talking about. So it's part of educating ourselves and using words interchangeably for a while, and then we replace them. You know, language is always evolving. You know, our language is set in stone that we have to only use these phrases. So as we become more aware and more educated of what our words and our phrases mean and how it impacts on people, I would suggest we really do need to start really honing in on that and listening to people with the lived experience to understand why these words are painful or difficult for them to hear. So I think, yeah, we need to use more positive language and also more awareness around the words like loss and grief. Those words should be more embedded in our communication, right? And saying, oh, right, you've had a loss. Being a member of our family means you've lost a family. You have to grieve that. We don't need to shy away from grief. And I think that's something as well that we've really done a disservice to many adopted people over the years. That needs to stop as well, I would suggest. So allowing grief to be a part of the conversation, and it sort of gives your child permission. And sometimes that's a very important dynamic because they're looking to you as their parent for that. And by saying, yeah, we can be sad today. Today's a hard day. We're sad that this is the day you lost your first family. We're happy that you joined our family, but we acknowledge and we sit with that. So allowing these words to be more in our vocabulary is also extremely important.
Absolutely. Because I'll say, like, personally, as a child, I never felt like I could express that grief because I felt like I would make my parents feel bad if I told them that, you know, and again, at the time it was all very, they weren't, you know, but I think that's important. Absolutely.
I hear that a lot from a lot of adult adoptees I work with. They actually wait to even search for family members, for example, because they don't want to offend or hurt their permanent family. And that's really heartbreaking. You know, we should feel safe. We need to feel safe in our families. And that means receiving all of us in all of our, you know, many colors and expressions and who we are, for sure.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry we went over time, but thank you for, I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I could talk to you all day probably. So I'll just take another extra moment to really thank you, Judith, for speaking your truth and sharing with us so openly. It's really, I personally really appreciate it. And I know all of the families watching appreciate it too. So thank you so much. I'll just quickly say that next week, for those that are still watching, Tisha Summers is with us. She's a registered psychotherapist, and we're going to talk about art therapy. So if you're around next week, Tuesdays at 12:15, that's what's happening on our Facebook Live. I wish everybody a great end to the rest of their day, a great week, and to take care of yourselves and each other. Bye for now.
Take care.